I'm excited to be joined by Morgan Krupetsky, Senior Director of Business Development, Institutions and Capital Markets, and Luigi DeMeo, Vice President of Business Development and Ecosystem, both from Avalanche. And this is our fourth edition of our quarterly State of Avalanche call. We're going to cover several topics around Avalanche and the broader ecosystem across various verticals, launches, partnerships, and initiatives from last quarter, and then a look ahead to the new year and what to look forward to in 2024. So given this is our fourth edition, we're going to assume our audience has a baseline awareness of the Avalanche blockchain and key differentiators. But if not, please feel free to catch replays of our 2023 quarterly webinars or reach out to Morgan or Luigi directly to learn more. And finally, a note that the information contained in this webinar is for informational purposes only and should not be considered as investment advice. Okay, with that out of the way, let's jump in. So, 2023 was an impressive year for Avalanche, starting with large infrastructure and distribution partnerships like AWS and Shopify. Under the gaming vertical, you announced partnerships with esports organization TSM, as well as AAA gaming partners, including Shrapnel and Gunzilla's Off the Grid. Can you talk to us a little bit about why these partnerships are important? How do you generally go about business development? And looking forward, what is your 2024 partnership and business development plans? Maybe start with you, Morgan.
Sure. And Heidi, thank you for having us, as always. And hello to the audience, even though we can't see them. But yeah, I think to your point, 2023 was a really exciting year for Avalanche, really across many different verticals and use cases. So we're really excited to ultimately kind of showcase how and why the Avalanche tech is really kind of suited for really a whole array of different industries and use cases, just given its customizability. So in terms of why all these partnerships I think were important is really to kind of showcase how established Web 2 or traditional businesses, however you want to refer to them, are either really addressing pain points in their day-to-day business operations and or kind of driving forward strategic business imperatives by leveraging blockchain technology, and notably Avalanche in these cases. So we, inherently we see these businesses inherently driving greater user adoption by nature of either transitioning part of their business model on chain or creating new kind of blockchain enabled products and services, which is really the ultimate goal, right? Mass adoption. And really kind of where it gets exciting is where end users start to adopt various applications that just so happen to be enabled by this technology. In terms of kind of how we go about, business development, I think each partnership is really reflective of many, many, many months of work, and in some cases, years of work and relationship building. Oftentimes when there's an announcement that's made, it's not, on the one hand, it's not just like a one and done. It is really the culmination of many, many months of work, and then really in some ways the beginning of a lot more work to come. So I would say from an Avalabs perspective, I always joke, one of our VPs of BD, John Nahas, always says our job within business development is to develop business. And all that's to say is I think we really pride ourselves in cultivating really kind of trusted advisor relationships with our partners across everything, across enterprise gaming, DeFi, NFTs, financial institutions, governments, and kind of everything in between. And it really includes support, I think, in everything from educational initiatives to helping our partners create and make like the business case internally for their internal stakeholders, getting internal and external stakeholder approval, working with them to kind of identify the necessary puzzle pieces to ultimately support and help them build and operationalize their respective digital asset strategies. So that's in general kind of how we work with our partners. And I think looking forward, we're really excited, I think at a high level about a handful of areas, including, continued tokenization of both financial and non-financial assets, gaming, social fi, and other types of consumer applications, deepen, really kind of the list goes on. And overall, I think it's, to kind of summarize it, I think, again, it's really the idea of bringing non-crypto native users, those who are off-chain, inherently on-chain because they've discovered a cool application, and the technology that enables that just, again, happens to be blockchain.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and you definitely hit upon some of the narratives that I think we'll dive into a little bit more and how you're addressing those. I think that's a good lead into sort of, partnerships with some of the institutions. And, at the end of last year, major financial institutions like JP Morgan and Citi revealed that they had built solutions on Avalanche. What kind of solutions are they building? And what about Avalanche makes it attractive to these large regulated financial institutions to deploy there? And where's it at? Are they on testnet? When do you expect them to go to mainnet?
Yeah, so I think you touched on in particular JP and Citi. The JP Morgan initiative was on testnet. The Citi initiative, which leveraged 3 different subnets, was a mainnet implementation. Both of them were under the kind of broad-based umbrella context of what's called Project Guardian, which is this like umbrella initiative under the Monetary Authority of Singapore that really enables large and regulated buy and sell side institutions to kind of take forward various on-chain initiatives, whether it's within the tokenization space or on-chain finance or some kind of combination of both. So as it relates to JP Morgan, that initiative was driven forward by JP Morgan and Apollo. Wisdom Tree was also involved, and ultimately, and happy to kind of go into any of the details, but at a high level, what it really meant to prove out was the idea of leveraging a combination of blockchain, smart contract logic, and tokenization to enable the inclusion of alternative assets, so private equity, credit, real estate, and infrastructure in more traditional kind of discretionary client portfolios beyond just the more standard public and more liquid assets. So by leveraging this technology, by putting these assets in tokenized form on the same rails as payment methods, they were able to really kind of demonstrate how tens of thousands of discretionary client portfolios could be subscribed to, redeemed, rebalanced in a way that going forward, potentially alternative investments could start being included in these client portfolios, and really at scale, which really doesn't happen today for a number of reasons. And then as it relates to the Citi use case, that really honed in on bilateral FX requests for quote, as well as trade execution. In this case, we've honed in on the dollar Sing FX pair, and Citi was considered the dealer kind of in this initiative, and then brought on board Fidelity International and T. Rowe Price as the 2 clients, and leveraged in this case kind of 3 different Avalanche subnets to really operationalize the idea of trade RFQs, as well as the idea of recording on chain every single kind of price quote that came from Citi, as well as the second simulated dealer, to really also assist with more robust kind of post-trade analytics and the enabling of the buy side to kind of adhere to their fiduciary responsibilities of best execution. So at a high level, those are kind of the applications, but really what I think attracted these and just other institutions to Avalanche in particular is really its customizability through subnets, and notably from an institutional perspective, evergreen subnets. Won't necessarily go into like a detailed explanation of this, but at a high level, what evergreen subnets enable financial institutions to do is really get the best of both public blockchain infrastructure development, DeFi innovation, the robust developer communities, while at the same time being able to account for a lot of the internal and industry-wide regulatory compliance and other types of considerations that historically have driven them to launch on what we would call enterprise chains. So the environments allow them to kind of enable and implement the utmost of customizability, whether it's privacy, permissioning, gasless transactions, or the ability to not have to hold crypto, and at the same time allows them to kind of leverage some of the things that we've built from an Avalanche perspective, notably being able to kind of benefit from the native intra-network interoperability that has always been part of the Avalanche roadmap, and something that I think, going forward, we're very excited to prove out. And so I think just like looking ahead, and we can go into this maybe a little bit later, but looking ahead, I think we're going to definitely see more of these types of things. And then over the next X amount of years, really start seeing things in much more kind of production commercialization mode, which, as I'm sure the audience understands, takes a while, but definitely excited to kind of seeing a lot of these things really, taking things to the next level.
Yeah, it's really exciting. I think it's great to see these names in particular, like, doing something and coming into the space. I think that brings a lot of credibility, and I think really we'll see a lot more. So,
Working on it.
yeah, fantastic. And then, something else I wanted to cover and ask about, which kind of brings a little bit more to like the retail investor side, is Republic just released the Republic note to retail investors on Avalanche. So maybe you can just, what is this note? Why is it significant? And I don't know, do you see more of this taking place in this industry moving forward?
Yeah, so I'm happy to review it. And I'd also love to get like Luigi's take, because I think from our business development team's perspective, we started getting more and more of our community excited, or seeing them get excited about the note in particular. And for certain reasons, and we'll go into why, but it'd be great to get his take as well. But at a high level, there's kind of two unique, I would say, things to highlight around the Republic note. So what it is at a high level, it's kind of a misnomer. It's not a debt instrument, but it is a way for Republic's 2.5 million customers, as well as anyone else who wants to come and onboard into the Republic or our INX platform, a way to really get exposure, broad-based ecosystem-wide exposure to the Republic ecosystem, which includes both companies raising, private companies raising through their funding portal, which really spans the gamut in terms of types of industries and types of companies, as well as exposure to Republic Capital, which is the venture investing side of things, and inherently allows someone to kind of get access to this broad-based ecosystem, as opposed to having to kind of pick and choose, which they still can. But allows them to get this broad-based exposure, allows retail investors in particular to get this exposure and to kind of invest in the note. So typically what we've seen so far, a lot of the tokenized asset offerings have been issued under what we'd call Reg D or Reg S, which are particularly for accredited investors. There were offerings within the Republic note, which were issued under what we call Reg CF or Reg Crowdfund, which allow retail investors to have access at much, much lower investment minimums. The last thing I would say that was really exciting is the note was finally listed on INX as well, which meant that upon minting of these tokens for a lot of the investors that had already bought into the note, a lot of them could start trading them on the secondary market, which is something that we always talk about at a high level. But it was really cool that the note was really, I think, the first time that we saw some, in this case, a real world asset launch and start actively trading in the secondary market. But Luigi, feel free to chime in if there's anything you would add, just based on kind of what you've seen and what you've seen from the community.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think on those three in particular, you really nailed down sort of that use case for us. I think Avalanche has sort of taken this opinion that we're going to push the envelope with use cases. Right, it's time now. I think like technology in general is fairly ready for mainstream adoption. That wasn't always the case, and so what Morgan, her team is doing, and Ed and his team, and all these teams, they're really pushing the envelope for it. It's time to actually get people using the chain.
Excellent. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So, I think everybody listening to this call, 2023, we heard a lot about RWAs, as in real world assets, not risk-weighted assets, and tokenization, major theme. I think it's going to continue to be a major theme throughout 2024. But, maybe how is Avalanche differentiated in this asset class? And, I think we've seen varying numbers in terms of just how big this opportunity is. And it's big, but how do you size it? And what are you seeing? What are you thinking? How are you approaching this?
So I think there's been a lot of like reports that have been written around what is the opportunity in tokenizations, like trillions and trillions. Because if you think about like all of the financial assets out there, plus all of the non-financial assets, commodities, to things that I think trade now, but more among like the retail community. So things like watches, whiskey, wine, sneakers, all of these things, like they're all considered RWAs. So it's kind of like mind-boggling to think just from a pure notional perspective or market perspective what that looks like, but it's big. And I think, to date, several protocols and teams have tokenized a whole host of different types of assets on Avalanche, everything from tokenized fiat, whether it's stable coins, wholesale CBDCs, or tokenized deposits, to different types of commodities, IP creator rights, private equity and credit, money market funds. And I think this will continue, obviously, this year and beyond. From an Avalanche perspective, I would highlight maybe two things. I mean, obviously, the customizability of subnets is huge, and in particular, the native intra-network interoperability that has the ability to allow these assets to kind of trade seamlessly from chain to chain without the reliance on third-party bridges. And importantly, and something that we haven't touched on yet, is really the sub-second transaction finality within Avalanche, and the idea that when you start talking about things that either require high throughput from a trading perspective or are particularly time sensitive from a trading perspective, or are value intensive, which obviously when you start talking about institutional amounts, it's a lot. You don't want to be in a situation where you're wondering whether your trade has settled, particularly if the underlying asset changes in price very, very frequently. So the fact that Avalanche has this sub-second transaction finality becomes that much more important when you kind of think about this from a scalability perspective. The one last thing I would just note in terms of kind of looking ahead, a lot of people talk about tokenization as like what tokenization will do to assets of like what the mutual fund did to ETF, or what ETFs did to the mutual fund. And all that's to say is I think for crypto natives, like a year is like a very long period of time. But when you're trying to talk about like upgrading and fundamentally changing legacy institutional infrastructure, it takes a long time.
A long time.
Takes a long time. And so what I would just say is, if you think about it in that context, it took over 25 years for US listed ETFs to hit ultimately kind of $4 trillion in AUM, and global bond ETF AUM to hit 1 trillion. Like, we're still in the very early stages, even though I feel like we've made a lot of progress. But all that's to say is I think year over year, the efforts, initiatives, assets will continue kind of growing. And, obviously we're very excited for that and to be on that journey.
Yeah. So your advice is be patient. It's happening, but it takes time.
Yeah. I mean, I've had to be patient, and so is Luigi, as you can imagine. So I just think it's kind of like a reframing for how we think about the crypto and blockchain space.
Yeah. We'll keep at it. Just one more question around this sort of tokenization theme before we move on. And Luigi, I promise we're gonna get you some opportunity to talk.
Luigi has a lot of things that he's gonna talk about.
Good. But last year you announced Avalanche Vista, a $50 million initiative from the Avalanche Foundation, really dedicated towards, tokenized assets coming onto Avalanche. And, how's the success been thus far? Have you seen it grow in the Avalanche ecosystem? Maybe just touch upon that.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, Vista is an up to $50 million allocation from the Avalanche Foundation, really focused on actually buying the underlying assets that are tokenized on Avalanche, and really would and does consider assets kind of across the board, the liquidity spectrum, tenor, so on and so forth. In general, as a BD team, we get a lot of inbound, but as a result of Vista, obviously we're getting a lot more, which is exciting. And so it's definitely been helpful in terms of a tool in engaging with various projects and working with them on kind of go-to-market strategy and advisory. What I would say is when we get particularly excited from a business development and Vista perspective to really lean in, at a high level, I would say we look for projects that really have kind of like a concrete value proposition and are able to articulate that well in terms of why someone from an investor standpoint would want to like, what is a compelling reason for them to access that asset via that platform, particularly if they have more ready access in the traditional or Web 2 world. What is it about that thing or the way that that thing is being offered that makes it kind of compelling from a Web 3 perspective? And then the other thing is really kind of working with teams who, regardless of what they're tokenizing, whether it's receivables or private credit or whiskey, like, do they have kind of deep networks in those respective areas that they can kind of work with those partners and really, again, we're trying to bring off-chain users and off-chain capital on-chain. So that's kind of at a high level what we look for. Our first like official deployment was part of Vista into the Republic note. And in that in particular, we joined the over 3,000 investors who had already invested among both retail and institutional investors, which was about, I think, 30 million in notional into the note that was already subscribed to. So we were really excited to kind of join in on that initiative. And at this point, we're always in like due diligence, always meeting with projects. And so I would say there's no like definitive timeline on Vista. We want to be thoughtful, but constantly kind of looking at projects and figuring out what makes the most sense in that context.
Yeah, interesting. Maybe turning to gaming a little bit, which has been pretty exciting to see the traction on Avalanche with the deployment of several high-profile subnets like Shrapnel and Beam. So, why is Avalabs interested in this vertical in particular, and why are you suited for hosting games?
Yeah, so, I could jump in.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say like, we have seen a lot of momentum. I think in particular, blockchain and crypto are really great for in-game assets. I think the story goes back to Vitalik actually like thinking about smart contracts in the context of his World of Warcraft gold being sort of taken by the game. So ownership of assets is important, and gaming is also tailored to the same demographic and same user base that crypto has. So it really goes hand in hand. In terms of us, subnets has provided what a lot of game developers want. They want their own environment. They want more control over the environment. They need more certainty over transaction fees. Sometimes they want those to be gasless. So I think there's just going to be like a walk and then run movement for the space. It's not going to be like throw all my stuff on a public chain and let's see how it goes. Like these are, for like example, Gunzilla, this is a game I believe it's raised over $40 million or something like that. They are not going to just YOLO their infrastructure. They need some certainty, right? They have legitimate investors and users. So Subnet provides this right now and will continue to do so. So, in terms of the ones we're really excited about, there's a number of them, but I think you mentioned Beam, which is really exciting. That's a subnet. People are actually trading the asset there. There are, I believe, 12 games signed up to join that subnet or so already. So that's exciting. We also have the TSM subnet that's basically soft launched, and that's going to be based on their Blitz app, which hosts many titles like League of Legends. I think that really starts to kick off this quarter into high gear. So really excited to see sort of like that engagement of their existing user base being brought on chain. And then, like you said, Shrapnel, very exciting game that, we've sort of been partnered with for a long time. We should also see that sometime early this year. And then, Gunzilla off the grid game. This is going to be an Xbox, PlayStation game that people will be using blockchain for. So some people are already, they've downloaded the mobile app. They're already playing the game that earns NFTs that will be transferable into the game, which is cool. So you could already earn some of the in-game assets and get engaged. I think they've done a really good job of thinking through the go-to-market, which is, typically the hard part for this stuff. And I expect that to go live hopefully pretty soon, maybe sometime this quarter. And then like we will learn a lot, right? So we are here are the games. They're really good games. They incorporate blockchain technology. Users will be being onboarded in a very soft way onto blockchains, and we'll learn sort of a lot from that experience. There'll be trading tokens, they'll be earning assets, and learning how to download wallets, and this is going to be fascinating. So I think Godzilla will be has the chance to be one of the largest retail userships of blockchain ever in history. So let's see what happens. It's a big statement, and yeah.
You
So
heard it here first.
You heard it here first. I love it.
you heard it here first. This is a fact that I'm stating it. No,
Breaking news.
breaking news. Source me. No, I think I really do think I think we're right there, and now it's a matter of okay, let's see what the adoption looks like.
So is adoption easier or faster in sort of the GameFi space than sort of the more DeFi institutional space?
I think it's a great question. I think like the adoption is different. So DeFi has adoption with its power users, and I always feel like DeFi will be a power user type of thing, right? Like even if you think about finance from the perspective of people all around the world, like what is the percentage of the population that trades options? Those are the people that are going to play with DeFi. They very much want to be actively involved in sort of managing their positions and stuff like that. Now, there will also be more passive parts of DeFi that get introduced over time, but I don't see that being quite large yet because of regulatory issues. So from DeFi perspective, not sure that that's, I think it's a different audience. In terms of like GameFi, I think it's all about bringing in new people who just, for whatever reason have no interest or had no interest in using blockchain. And frankly, they shouldn't think about blockchain. They should just be like, man, I've been playing this game for 2 years and now I have all these guns or all these like skins and all this stuff and I get to keep them and they're mine. And like, that was never the case. Like before a game would just wipe your whole slate and you're like, all right, well, this feels like I wasted a bunch of my time. It wasn't just for the experience. People like to like have a prize. That's why people get trophies at the end of the season. So I think that'll be interesting to see how they feel about the experience versus like what they've heard about the technology.
Yeah, interesting. And kind of segue into DeFi a little bit from here, and kind of talked about the FX market earlier, but just another opportunity in crypto that I know that your team has been discussing is modernizing the multi-trillion-dollar FX market and bringing it on chain. And so, what is the good use case for that? And what are the FX projects and trends that are developing on Avalanche?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think in particular, cross-border payments is a huge area of opportunity. When you send, money, let's say you're an American, you want to send money to Europe, it's quite expensive to actually convert that currency. Yeah, like you're talking about multiple points.
Yeah.
And that can be quickly done on chain with stable coins very cheaply, a few basis points. And so, I think the key for that to be really unlocked is being able to spend that currency in the real world. But we have the ability to sort of cross that chasm of, being able to reduce the cost of cross-border payments. Or if you're using your credit card or whatnot and you want to do it in a different jurisdiction, those fees are quite high. So I think that's an area of opportunity for the space. And you're already starting to do it, see it. I was recently playing with a wallet called Cypher that allows you to sort of use your on-chain crypto capital and spend it via debit card. So being able to spend crypto assets, generally is what will unlock this space. Because if everything is simply fiat on-ramp, off-ramp, it's going to become expensive. There's going to be bottlenecks and there's going to be regulatory hurdles. So, I always say that once people start getting paid on-chain, that's when everything gets unlocked. So we'll see.
I think part of that also, Luigi touched on it. I mean, you've kind of focused on like the retail side of things. I think part of the reason why we're very excited about FX and bringing dollar and non-dollar stablecoins to Avalanche is inherently it spans retail and institutional use cases, everything from remittances and FX conversions and payments to hedging, financing, speculating. And so, at this point, when you think about it, the FX market from a traditional financial services standpoint, retail, I would say, is the one that kind of pays a lot of the spread, but even small businesses and corporations inherently get charged a lot as well, even if they do have access to the traditional banking system. So I think part of it is just the applicability is so broad-based. And so it's exciting to kind of work with different partners to finally kind of like operationalize all the stuff that we've been talking about, and see it be used in the real world.
Yeah, definitely. And, just more broadly speaking about DeFi, how would you characterize the success of Avalanche DeFi in its current state? Where do you see the biggest holes or, maybe challenges and the biggest needs? And, what's your game plan going forward in 2024 to address these?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think generally DeFi has been concentrated within Ethereum. And that's been where a lot of liquidity has been, and a lot of success, and also like a lot of where the builders started. Avalanche really started with DeFi with the Avalanche Rush program in 21. Since then, we've seen a lot of like native builders come out of that, and existing applications remain. So I think, and I've said this for a while, I think DeFi serves as like sort of the top of the funnel, and also like the pipes for other applications. And so to push it as a specific vertical is an interesting endeavor, but I do think most DeFi apps will be on all chains. Like their goal is to maximize revenue, simply put. So it's almost like saying that, certain type of food chain would only be in one city. If they really do well in that city, they're going to be in all cities because it's not complicated to sort of move to other chains. So I think it's less a function of, getting builders to only build on the chain. And it's more a function of making sure that the economic activity that gets brought to that chain is one that builders want to sort of serve. So from our perspective, like our unique value proposition for DeFi is subnets that we're bringing online. Like if we were able to bring subnets of millions and 20 and 30, $40 million users, that's a lot of activity to draw directly into DeFi and, sort of funnel in. And that'll be a unique value proposition to just Avalanche. So that's kind of how we think about it. It's more of a long game versus, sort of one-off optimizations to various DeFi protocols, which we also do see, and we have, a lot of those builders in our ecosystem. And we are also sort of supporting many native builders. For example, Dexalot is a subnet that's within DeFi. They built a central limit order book exchange. We recently announced a large multiverse incentive program for them. And they've also hit like some of their largest volumes as of late. And also we have a new subnet that launched called Hubble. That's a perpetual swap exchange on a subnet. So something similar to like DYDX, but on a subnet. And they just soft launched, so they'll be ramping up shortly. These are all native builders, unique to Avalanche. And then, we obviously have a lot of success with our other builders in the ecosystem too. So I think DeFi is in a really good spot on Avalanche. I think we're seeing good builders, and then now it's a matter of bringing a lot of that economic activity to them, so they can really expand their revenues.
Yes. So just a follow up on that what you were just talking about, particularly with like the subnets. How do you explain the infrastructure options, to DeFi builders? What should they take into consideration when contemplating launching on C chain versus its own subnet?
Yeah, so I think like a subnet makes sense in a few different scenarios. One, you have pure product market fit, and you have real adoption, and you can sort of survive on your own chain, and this is strictly a better economic opportunity for you, for your token, for your company, for your user base, for your DAO, whatever. Like that's one scenario. The other scenario is simply put, like the way you've built your application it needs super high throughput, and the only way to achieve that is on its own dedicated chain. And that's the other way it makes sense. But if you're just starting out and it's standard DeFi protocol, it wouldn't really make sense to deploy your own subnet up front. There's a lot of infrastructure knowledge and costs, so it would make more sense to start on C chain, see how you do, and that's what Dexalot did. That's also what Hubble did, and then move to your own subnet when appropriate.
Okay, interesting. Changing gears a little bit, maybe we can talk about hyperspace, which is, if everybody doesn't know, multi-chain marketplace that recently facilitated nearly $20 million in NFT sales in the last 3 months. Also home to Dokyo, which at one point was the most traded NFT collection across any blockchain. What do you think caused this massive NFT trading volume growth?
That's a good question. Avalanche has always been a laggard in terms of the NFT space. It really hasn't had that take off in any real way. But there was a concerted effort put forth. A lot of credit goes to Dominic Carbonaro, who leads that vertical. But it was a concerted effort put forth last year, the end of last year. It started with the Avalanche program, which really focused on increasing the quality of the content and the art on Avalanche. And sort of the idea behind that was like you get to spend time with different mentors on Avalanche and sort of, work on your own art. And this like sort of was a signal to, projects that would be of higher quality. That went well. And then, obviously the hyperspace announcement plus the incentives associated with it really sort of like brought things into new gear. I think the Dokyo Mint was one of the larger ones on Avalanche. It's also like a 55 AVAX floor. So one NFT is over $2,000 in dollars. It's that's from like I think it was a 5 AVAX mint or something like that. So it's been a large move. It's there now. I think yesterday it was it traded most volume across all blockchains in terms of a collection. So very cool to see that. We had a mint today called Steady, which has like really fantastic art. I really love it. They minted out in I think like 10 minutes or so. So there's a lot of activity. There's a lot of excitement. I think we've always had the community to sort of that really was interested in NFTs and art and collectibles, but we never really had enough momentum to kind of get that flywheel going. And I think that's sort of changed now, and we're seeing a lot of new projects that want to mint here, and that's really exciting for us. Like the tide is sort of changed.
Are there any specific initiatives to attract more of that audience to Avalanche in terms of the arts and culture space?
Yeah, I think there's plans for a new season of Avalanche. That's definitely in the works. And then in addition, the hyperspace rewards are monthly seasons. I think last month I believe it was over $2 million in rewards that were earned. So very sizable. I think many people earned 30, 40 grand individually. So very large rewards. It makes sense to pay attention. Sometimes I would say, and this is one of them. So I think you'll continue to see interesting things there with loot boxes and different ways to engage the audience. And, we'll sort of see what comes of it. But I think it's clear that Avalanche definitely is very focused on its on-chain community and wants to continue to see that proliferate.
Excellent. Moving on to the platform a little bit. So, Avalanche C-Chain was one of the many EVM blockchains that saw influx of transaction and gas fee spikes due to inscriptions. So, maybe you can just, what are inscriptions and how did the network react? Luigi, I don't know if you want to start with this.
Yeah, inscriptions are interesting. It's a new sort of way of doing transactions that like started with Bitcoin. Basically, it's just like especially on the EVM, it's a way to do cheaper transactions. The actual, you can't execute any of the transactions with a smart contract, and it has to be all handled with an off-chain sort of indexer, which is, sort of a limitation for it, but hopefully people are working on things like decentralized sequencers. But at the end of the day, these are just tokens. And the inscription craze that we saw was really symbiotic of the meme coin craze we saw, right? Like a lot of this stuff it all rhymes, right? When you have a lot of new, money being made in the space, it often like flows into other funnels. and this was one of the funnels of, was sort of attracting some liquidity. And basically, people were just minting tokens for free. There was no cost to mint. It was simply the gas cost was the cost to mint. And I can't explain the rationale, but whatever it was presumed that whatever they were minted at, they would sell for more. As it goes sometimes in the world, and that worked for a while. People were doing that; they were making money, and that's ultimately why gas prices spiked so high, because the gas price wasn't necessarily a cost in the way this was viewed. It was simply, okay, if I spend 10 AVAX in gas, well, I'll sell it for 12 or 13 AVAX, right? So it rhymed a lot with the 2005 run up in housing prices. Home prices can never go down methodology, investment methodology. So yeah, I mean, that stuff's not sustainable, but at the end of the day, like, I do think it pointed to a number of issues that are already well known and documented with the EVM. But in particular, like, if somebody wants to bid up a certain amount of block space and pay for it, that's how a permissionless chain works, public chain works. And there are different chains that handle this in different ways. I know Solana has this local fee markets. I know many people assume that has to do with, like, each application has its own fee market. That's not really how it works. But on the EVM in particular, this is something that really hurts it. And there are many efforts underway to sort of solve this and sort of make this easier. We have a number of initiatives to improve the throughput of the EVM, but also we have a number of initiatives to build out other virtual machines and SDKs, like the Hyper SDK, that we expect to see adoption for. So I think we're taking a multi-pronged approach, and we'll see that come to fruition hopefully this year.
Yeah, excellent. Maybe we can talk about some of the major platform developments the Avalanche team has brought to Avalanche in 2023. Maybe start with Teleporter. What is it? How does it fit in with Avalanche Warp messaging? And what impact will it have on the UX and value proposition more broadly?
Yeah, so Teleporter is so AWM, or Avalanche Warp Messaging, is the general protocol of how subnets can communicate with each other. You can liken it to something like IBC. It's got different trade-offs. It's a little more lightweight. And then Teleporter is an implementation built on top of it that people can actually use. So it works within all the EVM-based subnets in particular. But it allows you essentially to move tokens from, let's say, the C chain to subnets, or move NFTs, or send arbitrary messages, etc. So I believe the production-based Teleporter code is going live earlier this quarter. We put out the Avalanche Academy course already. People are deploying contracts, via that course. So they're testing it out, and that's what we wanted. We wanted people to learn how to use it before it was actually in production, which is important for us. Now it's just a matter of crossing the T's and dotting the I's to getting it live. But that's functionally, Avalanche hasn't been able to operate how it's wanted to from, like, an architectural perspective without this stuff in production, right? Like, moving value from the C chain to subnets was and is, like, interesting to people. There's native USDC, there's exchange integrations, Oracle feeds, and all this kind of stuff that people want to use, and this is a way for them to do it. So I think that this will be a major unlock for Avalanche. It also will speed the time to deploy a subnet up tremendously. You don't need to wait for a third-party bridge provider to integrate your subnet. You can deploy the Teleporter contracts. That's why we have the Academy course, to really make that time to deploy really, really short. So that's going to be a major unlock for us. And that, in terms of the UX, like, I do think that's something to still solve. I think that's really up to the developer, how they want to handle that. And I think there's a lot of tools for them to obfuscate and make a lot of the UX feel very clean. But that doesn't come out of the box. That's the developer's job.
One thing that Luigi mentioned that I would just kind of emphasize is the fact that when you take a step back and you think about kind of like the target state for vision for Avalanche, the vision was always this network of natively interoperable networks. So it's not like, subnets became this thing that we wanted to kind of proliferate the growth of, and now we have to figure out how to connect them. Like, this was always part of the architecture from day one, having this kind of network of natively interoperable blockchains, whether that is interoperable for asset transfer or message passing or data feeds or whatever it is. Obviously, that could be kind of that could reference a whole host of different assets, messages, so on and so forth. And so I think what we're particularly excited about is this kind of like one of the last puzzle pieces to really kind of demonstrate the capabilities that we always kind of were working toward and building toward, and is really kind of one of the big value props of Avalanche, not just in one vertical, but really across different verticals, including gaming and DeFi and enterprise and institutions. And so I think kind of looking ahead, we're really excited to really showcase what we've always been talking about, but kind of point to very concrete examples of how different companies and projects and institutions are leveraging the technology.
Yeah, thanks for adding that in. That makes a lot of sense. And you Luigi, you mentioned the Hyper SDK, and which I think that was created last year, which is the developer software kit that provides a framework for high throughput chain. How do you think the introduction of these blockchains will change the landscape for Avalanche? Do you see significant development in virtual machine development on Avalanche going forward?
Yeah, the Hyper SDK is definitely an in-house built SDK that is sort of our answer to non-EVM high throughput blockchains, except particularly optimized for people who want their own chain, which is, I think, a little bit different than what you've seen before. So it's still an alpha, not production ready yet. We're making a lot of progress with that, but when I think about it, it's like, if you want super high throughput, and you're okay with non-EVM, right now your options are deploy on Solana, Sui, Aptos, those kind of chains, and potentially you could do something with the Cosmos SDK, but the throughput isn't really, it's a little different. So Hyper SDK instead will be different than that. It'll give you that type of throughput that you're seeing on Solana and Sui and then those other chains, but we'll give you the ability to do that out of the box with your own chain. So none of these limitations that we're constantly having to sort of, challenge ourselves with the EVM will be as present. With that said, becomes the challenge of educating people on a new SDK, and that won't happen overnight. I think it does, however, bring a new intellectual class to Avalanche, and we've already seen that. We've seen builders who are already following along with all the Hyper SDK developments. They're already building on it, and that's new for us. Like, we didn't see that before, right? We had a lot of people deploying on the EVM, and that's fine, but that's not unique to Avalanche in any way. So it's nice to have something unique to us that we're bringing to the world that hopefully will solve people's problems.
I think maybe, Luigi, one thing just to level set. I know, Heidi, you mentioned, we're assuming kind of a base level knowledge of Avalanche, but maybe just one thing just to emphasize is, oftentimes we talk to a lot of our partners, we emphasize that Avalanche is EVM compatible, and obviously C-Chain is EVM based as well. And that is what resonates with a lot of our partners. But as kind of different requirements pop up, particularly high throughput requirements or different innovations kind of occur in the VM space, it's exciting to think about the fact that Avalanche can kind of continue to grow and keep up with that, such that, who knows, maybe at one point, one subnet's going to kind of cultivate so much adoption that a lot of the activity migrates there. Like, it's just exciting, the fact that kind of the network can continue to grow and evolve as we see these innovations in the VM space.
Yeah, interesting. Morgan, I think it wasn't last quarter, but one of the prior quarterly calls, we talked about Ava Cloud. Can you give us an update and maybe start level set, what is it? But I think more importantly, like we'd love to hear how the adoption's been since you last discussed it with us.
Sure. So AvaCloud is kind of a misnomer from a naming perspective. At a high level, what it is it's basically Avalab's managed custom blockchain service offering. So think about like subnet as a service, where the team kind of comes in and understands the client's use case and customizability considerations, whether it's a government entity, a financial services institution, a gaming company. Obviously, they're going to have very different requirements and considerations for their particular blockchain build, because obviously they have very different use cases. So the team kind of comes in, understands what that looks like, and helps to create, stand up, and to the extent it's interesting for the client, manage that custom blockchain or that subnet for them. And that's something that we have found, again, has really resonated with a whole host of different types of partners, where they don't want to, nor should they have to, concern themselves or worry about the actual blockchain build. They instead should kind of focus on their core competency, which is their business, their application. And so really the parts of the build that sit kind of on top of the blockchain. And so the team really comes in and kind of helps to create and manage really that end-to-end blockchain infrastructure. So things like RPC endpoints and block explorers, a managed validator set, all of these things that really helps to get clients to production as quickly and successfully as possible with custom chains. And in terms of the success, I mean, the team has been working with, again, like a whole spectrum of different types of companies. So everything from gaming companies to enterprises, such as SK Planet, which is a subsidiary of SK Telecom, to JP Morgan and Citi and Deloitte, with their work with FEMA. And so it's pretty broad based in terms of and Shrapnel. I mean, there's a whole kind of gamut in terms of the types of companies, but at a high level, it's really, again, this managed service offering that really makes it a lot easier to spin up subnets.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. And then let's just turn to the community. We are getting close to time, but want to cover a couple more things before I let you go. So you introduced the Avalanche community proposal process last year, I believe. And there was one proposal in particular, the ACP 13, which sparked quite a bit of conversation, which was around lowering initial subnet deployment costs. So I don't know, maybe you can summarize what this was all about, and so the developments on that proposal, and how will that affect the trajectory of Avalanche going forward?
Yeah. So one of the things that one of the consistent feedbacks we received regarding architecture is people love subnets. They want to use subnets. They want to deploy subnets, but subnets were expensive. So I think the impetus behind ACP 13 is to find a way to still give people the platform that they love and use, want to use and want to deploy, but being able to lower the cost, right? So ACP 13 proposes removing the primary network validation requirement, which is staking 2,000 AVAX for and validating the primary network for developers to deploy a subnet. And that's not been adopted yet, but it seems to have pretty overwhelming support from everybody I've spoken to. This was also important on the institutional front. Many institutions did not want to validate the C chain in particular, right? There's a lot of permissionless activity, but in order to deploy a subnet, you would have to do that in the old architecture. So this will primarily, number one, reduce costs in terms of hardware to validate a subnet, but number two, also alleviate institutions from, activities that they necessarily weren't able to do, but that weren't necessary for the network, frankly. So it's a win-win. I anticipate this to kind of sort of get written into the code across multiple iterations. and this will, unlock Avalanche a little bit further. And then one of the other conversations that stemmed from ACP 13 was pay-as-you-go fees. And what this really introduces is the ability for a subnet validator to pay small fees over time rather than an upfront cost to validate a subnet. And this sort of alleviates the capital expenditure or upfront cost versus, sustaining more operating expenses over time, sort of lowering the barrier for people to come in and validate as well. And so, if these types of things are able to be adopted by the Avalanche community, I think subnets will represent some of the most flexible infrastructure that people could build on.
Amazing. We've covered quite a bit so far, but I would love to take like these last couple of minutes that we have together to really talk about sort of 2024. We're here. What are you most excited about, whether it's, Avalanche specific and some of the things that you're doing, or just in general about, sort of the markets and the space. There's a lot happening, I think, going into 2024.
I feel like we've covered so much, but we haven't even talked about meme coins.
No, we have not.
There's just so much to cover.
Here's your opportunity, Morgan.
I was going to say, I think for me, it's just really exciting to kind of see the Avalanche ecosystem growing across so many different verticals. It's just really cool to see kind of the fruits of a lot of like collective labor between Avalabs BD, our partners, the community. And so that's just really exciting to see. And I'm excited to kind of continue to see that this year and beyond. From an adoption standpoint, I think, again, social-fi and consumer type of apps, a lot of us are really excited about, because I think the space more broadly is still looking for those like killer use cases. And so between that, gaming, and a few others, I think those could be kind of the unlocks to just bringing inherently much more adoption and adoption from like Web 2 traditional users that, again, don't know or shouldn't really care that they're using blockchain. So definitely excited for that. From an RWA standpoint, again, we'll be focused on it from a financial asset perspective, but we're also really excited, I think, about RWAs in the context of non-financial assets or non-securities. And so really being able to kind of see, cultivate, and demonstrate more robust community as ecosystem as it relates to the trading of these non-security real-world assets. So again, things like wine, whiskey, trading cards, watches, and things like that. And then I'm sure Luigi will add, and I know we haven't even talked about our accelerator called Codebase, but there's definitely a lot on the application side of things, and then obviously on the technical and platform side of things as well.
Yeah,
Luigi, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think one of the more exciting things for me is in particular the Codebase program, which is effectively like our Y Combinator for Web3. And we simply sat down and realized that one of the biggest challenges we had was not necessarily only grabbing developers, but to find successful founders in the space. And so Codebase is necessarily designed just to sort of improve the quality and sort of the hit rate and success rate of founders in this space. So it's an incredibly, intimate program. It does not, I believe right now we're tracking to accept 10 to 15 teams into the initial cohort, but they will be, really, really closely working with our team and, a bunch of industry veterans to sort of help, sort of accelerate their adoption. And, applications are still open there. I've really been impressed with the quality of what we've seen, but I do still think there's opportunity for people to apply. And what that comes to a $50,000 stipend to participate in the program over a 3-month time period, as well as up to $400,000 in prizes at the end of the 3-month cohort. Obviously, with that, all the networking and sort of ability for marketing associated with the project. So we expect this program to sort of, really do big things for us for Avalanche. So excited about that. And I think we really covered most of it. So this was a fantastic discussion.
Amazing. Thank you so much. This has been great. I love hearing everything that's happening on Avalanche. I am so amazed that we got through an hour without talking about regulatory environment, which seemed to be like come up in every conversation last year, but we didn't. And so much good stuff is happening. So I would love just to like plug for our audience, if you want to follow the progress of Avalanche in real time, make sure to check out Frosty Metrics at frostymetrics.com, the one-stop platform for everything Avalanche data, including DeFi, GameFi, and NFTs. And with that, Morgan, Luigi, thank you so much. This has been great talking with you today, and we look forward to next quarter's webinar.
Awesome.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.